Good Monday morning. It's tea time. I'm reading today from Lorica, Celtic Voices Against Racism. And this is from the third chapter, which is written by Kenneth McIntosh. And the chapter is titled Shamrock and Papyrus, Celtic Christianity's Debt to Africa. And I'm going to read the one little section called Africans in Ireland. This historical vignette is based on an Irish litany written by Ongus, the Chaldee, in 799, which says, 7 Egyptian monks in desert Julia, I invoke into my aid through Jesus Christ. Today, desert Julia is Crumlin, County Antrim, in Ireland. Does it seem strange to think of a Coptic monk from Africa coming to live in an Irish monastery in the early Middle Ages? A survey of early Christianity in the Isles reveals abundant evidence of the African connection in art, literature, and spiritual wisdom. The medieval scholar Alcuin of York, England, described Irish monks as Pere Egyptitaci, children of the Egyptians. And the Irish antiphony of Bangor boasted, this house full of delight is built on the rock, and indeed the true vine transplanted out of Egypt. The Welsh monk Rigafark, in his Life of St. David, says that David, the patron saint of Wales, imitated the monks of Egypt and lived a life like theirs. Even the place names in Ireland, as well as Scotland today, reflect the importance of the ancient connection with northern Africa. Surrounded by Ireland's green hills, Celtic Christians maintained a connection with the African desert by using place names like Desart, Westmeath, Desert Martin, Londonderry, Desert Anguissa, Limerick, and Killa Desert, Clare. The influence of Egyptian faithways in the Celtic and Anglo-Saxon kingdoms reflects the importance of Africa in the larger picture of early Christianity. Yale-educated Professor Thomas C. Oden says, quote, Africa played a decisive role in the formation of Christian culture. Decisive intellectual achievements of Christianity were explored and understood first in Africa before they were recognized in Europe. African contributions to the spirituality of the West have historically been underplayed by a preference for the term Egyptian rather than African. This stylistic convention to some degree reflects Western and racial bias against sub-Saharan Africa. This bias can be seen in Hegel's 19th century philosophy of history, where he writes, at this point, we leave Africa, not to mention it again. For it is no historical part of the world, it has not movement or development to exhibit. Historical movements in it, that is, in its northern part, belong to the Asiatic or European world. What we properly understand by Africa is the unhistorical, undeveloped spirit. A 20th century BBC radio series still reflected this perspective, saying that any cultural consideration of Africa is pointless because there's only the unrewarding gyrations of barbarous tribes in picturesque but irrelevant corners of the globe. Erasing the reality of Africa contributes to the erasure of individual Black people as equal humans deserving the same rights and privileges as whites. In the introduction to Black Skin, White Masks, Frantz Fanon argues that behind the devaluation of the Black body is the idea of Africa having no history, that is, no culture or civilization that can be considered truly human. The influence of this idea on Western society's institutions is reflected in the way they treat those of African descent. This bias has its foundation in minimizing the extent of cultural development in the ancient world in the lower regions of the continent. It also ignores the continuity among African cultures connected by the long umbilical cord of the Nile River. Father Pacius Ascul, formerly pastor of St. Mary of Egypt Orthodox Church in Kansas City, Missouri, laments the fact that, quote, Black saints have been depicted as white and African bishops have been portrayed as Europeans. The remembrance and acknowledgement of our historical spiritual foundations is long overdue. The Nile River allowed African cultures to connect via the Mediterranean Sea with the North Atlantic Ocean and ports as far away as the Celtic Isles. A decade ago, I visited Tintagel Castle, the place where, in Arthurian lore, Uther Pendragon and the Lady Igraine conceived Arthur with the magical assistance of the wizard Merlin. Tintagel is a wild and forbidding landscape, the perfect setting for the myth of the great Celtic king. Walking into the museum on site, I was amazed to see a display of pottery made in Africa and shipped to Tintagel in the 5th century. Such African wares are not unusual in the archaeological record of this southern English port, proof of trade and travel in ancient times between Africa and what we now call Ireland, England, Wales, and Scotland. While Western Christianity in general owes a great deal to Africa, there was an especially close relationship with the churches of Anglo-Celtic Isles. As Professor Oden says, the history of the planting of African monasticism in Ireland is one of the most astonishing of all the stories of the preservation of civilization. Have a blessed day.